My sister and I graduated from medical school at the same time. We both worked hard and earned our degrees. But when it came to student loans, our parents made a choice. They paid off every dollar of hers and ignored mine completely. When I asked about it, they simply said, "She deserves it more, honey." They threw her a big celebration for being debt-free and proudly showed up to support her. What they didn't know was that a small surprise was waiting for them at that party, and it was something they never saw coming. The first time I realized I was the invisible twin, we were 6 years old, standing in front of a towering birthday cake that only had Jessica's name written in frosting. My mother had laughed it off, saying the baker ran out of room and that since Jessica was the sensitive one, she needed the extra validation. That small, sugary exclusion set the stage for a lifetime of being the shadow in the corner of the room, the girl who was so resourceful and independent that she apparently didn't require the basic emotional or financial nutrients a child needs to grow. Now, 20 years later, standing in my parents' pristine kitchen, that old, familiar ache was back, sharper and more jagged than ever before. "She deserves it more, honey," my mother said, her voice airy and distracted as she meticulously arranged a stack of gourmet lavender honey cupcakes on a tiered silver display stand. She didn't even look up at me. Her entire focus was on the aesthetics of the celebration, making sure every crumb was in its place for the party that would publicly canonize Jessica as the golden child. "Jessica's always been more dedicated to her studies, Audrey. You've always had other interests. It's only fair we help her get a clean start." The casual dismissal stung worse than a physical blow to the face. I stood there, my hands gripping the edge of the granite island so hard my knuckles turned white, my own medical school diploma still fresh in its heavy mahogany frame resting against the counter. I had just spent 4 years bleeding my soul into textbooks, surviving on caffeine and 4 hours of sleep, all while working a part-time lab job to keep my head above water. "Mom, we both graduated with honors," I said, my voice remarkably steady despite the roar of blood in my ears. "We have the exact same GPA. To the decimal point. I don't understand why you and Dad would pay off every cent of Jessica's loans, nearly $200,000, but leave me with nothing but interest rates and debt." My mother finally sighed, a long, weary sound of martyrdom, and looked at me with that expression of mild disappointment she usually reserved for a chipped teacup. "Audrey, don't be difficult. Your sister doesn't have a wealthy, influential mentor like Dr. Fleming taking a personal interest in her future. You've always had advantages Jessica didn't. You find your own way. Jessica needs us." I almost let out a hysterical laugh. Dr. Vivian Fleming was my research advisor because I had earned that position through 80-hour weeks in a windowless lab, scrubbing data and monitoring neural cultures while Jessica was skiing in Aspen with our parents during winter breaks. My advantage was that I worked myself to the point of physical exhaustion because I knew, deep down, there was no safety net waiting for me. I was being punished for my own resilience. "So, I'm being penalized for being successful on my own?" I asked, the hurt finally beginning to leak through the cracks in my composure. "Because I worked harder to find mentorship, I'm worth $200,000 less to this family?" The door swung open and my father walked in, looking every bit the proud patriarch. He immediately went to my mother, sliding a comforting arm around her shoulder as if she were the one under attack. "No one is punishing you, Audrey," he said, his voice booming with a false sense of pragmatism. "We're just being practical. Your sister needs more help than you do. You've always been the resourceful one. You'll figure it out. You always do." Resourceful. That was the word they used to justify every missed soccer game, every ignored science fair victory, and every time they flew across the country for Jessica's volleyball tournaments while I took the bus to my research presentations. It was their universal hall pass for neglect. If Audrey is resourceful, we don't have to show up. If Audrey is resourceful, we don't have to pay. Tomorrow was Jessica's debt-free celebration. My parents had planned it down to the last detail, inviting extended family, prestigious colleagues, and even some of our former professors. The invitations, embossed in gold, read celebrating Jessica's achievement, as if the act of having your bills paid by your parents was a personal milestone on par with discovering a cure for a disease. "I need to head out," I said, abruptly gathering my bag. I couldn't breathe in that kitchen anymore. The smell of sugar and favoritism was suffocating. "I have an early shift at the hospital tomorrow. Will you still make it to the party?" Mom asked, a flicker of genuine concern crossing her face. But I knew it wasn't for me. "It would look very odd if you weren't there. It might upset your sister on her special day." "I'll be there, I promised," the words feeling like ash in my mouth. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from Dr. Fleming. "Need to speak with you urgently about the Patterson Fellowship." Big news. "Come to my office first thing tomorrow." I stared at the screen, a cold, crystalline realization settling over me. The Patterson Fellowship was the holy grail of neurosurgical research. Only one student in the entire country received it each year. It didn't just come with prestige, it came with a full stipend and complete loan forgiveness. My parents' favoritism wasn't just unfair anymore, it was about to become a public irony. And as I drove away from the house where I was always second best, I realized that for the first time in 26 years, the truth was about to come out in a way they couldn't ignore. The history of being a lesser twin is written in 1,000 small indignities. In our childhood home in Cleveland, Jessica was the vibrant one, the one who filled the rooms with noise and laughter. I was the quiet observer, which was really just code for the child who learned early on that her voice didn't carry as far. When we both decided to go into medicine, my parents hadn't been proud, they had been worried, specifically about me. "Medical school isn't just about being book smart, Audrey," my father had warned me during our senior year of college. "It takes grit. It takes a certain kind of fire. Jessica has always had that competitive edge. Are you sure you won't just fade into the background?" The irony was a bitter pill. At Ohio State, I maintained a 4.0 while working 20 hours a week. Jessica struggled, her grades slipping whenever the social scene got too demanding. Our parents didn't see her struggle as a lack of grit, they saw it as a need for more resources. They bought her tutors, paid for elite MCT prep courses, and even bought her a brand new car to reduce her stress during finals. I received a $20 gas card and a reminder to change my oil. I never hated Jessica for it. That was the most complicated part. She was my sister, my other half, and in her own way, she tried to be there for me. But she lived in a different world, one where the floor was made of gold and the ceiling was non-existent. She didn't create the imbalance, she just grew tall in the sunlight our parents directed solely at her. The morning of the party, I met Dr. Fleming in her office. She was a legend in the field, a woman who had broken more glass ceilings than I could count. She looked at me over her glasses, her silver hair shimmering under the fluorescent lights. "Audrey, sit," she said, her voice unusually warm. "I have the committee's decision. You've been awarded the Patterson Fellowship." I felt the air leave my lungs. Are you sure? "Your research on neurovascular regeneration was the most innovative the board has seen in a decade," she said, smiling broadly. "You're going to Baltimore, Audrey. Johns Hopkins. And because of the merit of your work, the fellowship will be clearing your entire student debt effective immediately. You've earned your freedom." I sat there, tears finally pricking my eyes. Not just because of the money or the prestige, but because for the first time, someone had seen the resourceful girl and decided she deserved to be rewarded, not exploited. "There's more," Dr. Fleming continued, her eyes twinkling with a bit of mischief. "I received an invitation to your sister's celebration tonight. Your parents seem very eager to showcase the family's success. I think it would be the perfect venue to officially announce your fellowship. It's traditional for the mentor to break the news, and I'd like to do that for you, if you're comfortable with it." My stomach did a slow, nauseous roll. Dr. Fleming, my parents, they've made this night entirely about Jessica. If you announce this, they'll think I'm trying to upstage her. They told me to let her have her moment. Dr. Fleming leaned forward, her expression hardening into something protective. Audrey, I have watched you work yourself to the bone for 2 years. I have seen your parents at hospital functions, and I have heard the way they talk about poor Jessica needing help while you have it all figured out. Recognition isn't a zero-sum game. If your light makes them uncomfortable, it's because they're standing in the dark. Let me do this. I took a breath, feeling a strange, new sensation, the feeling of having a champion. Okay, I whispered. Do it. The party was held at a rooftop terrace in downtown Detroit, an opulent display of glass and light. A massive banner hung across the entrance. Congratulations, Dr. Jessica Collins. There was no mention of the other Dr. Collins. As I walked in, I saw my mother parading Jessica around to a group of surgeons from Detroit Medical Center. Jessica looked uncomfortable, her silver dress shimmering as she shifted from foot to foot. Audrey, you made it, Jessica said, breaking away from the group to hug me. She smelled like expensive perfume and stress. Thank God. Mom is being a lot. She's acting like I won a Nobel Prize for just existing. It's your night, Jess, I said, trying to mean it. Is it? Jessica whispered, her eyes searching mine. I saw the invitation, AUD. I told them to put your name on it too. I told them we both did this. They said it would confuse the message of the debt-free celebration. I felt a pang of sympathy. Jessica wasn't a villain. She was a golden bird in a cage, and she was starting to realize the bars were there. The dinner was a blur of high-end catering and forced smiles. I was seated at a secondary table with my cousins, while Jessica sat at the head table with our parents and the chief of neurosurgery. My father stood up, clinking his glass with a silver spoon. Friends, family, colleagues, he began, his voice radiating pride. We're here to celebrate a very special milestone. We all know how hard medical school is, but to see our Jessica come through it with such grace, and to know she is entering her residency entirely debt-free, is a testament to her dedication and our belief in her future. The room erupted in applause. Jessica stared at her plate. We've always known Jessica was the one who would push the boundaries, my mother added, standing up. She's our ambitious one. We were honored to invest in her journey because we knew she'd make the Collins name mean something in the medical world. The exclusion was so pointed it felt like a physical weight. I looked over at Dr. Fleming. She was already standing. If I may, Dr. Fleming's voice rang out, commanding and cool. As Audrey's mentor, I feel it's only appropriate to share some news that adds to the Collins name success tonight. My father looked surprised, but gestured for her to continue. Of course, Dr. Fleming. We know Audrey has done some helpful work in your lab. Dr. Fleming walked to the center of the floor. Audrey hasn't just done helpful work. She has been awarded the Patterson Fellowship at Johns Hopkins. It is the highest honor a graduating medical student can receive in this country. It carries a prestige that few ever achieve, and it comes with full, merit-based loan forgiveness. The silence that followed was deafening. The guests began to whisper, their eyes darting from the Jessica banner to me. In fact, Dr. Fleming continued, her gaze locking onto my parents. The committee noted that Audrey's independence and lack of external financial support during her schooling made her achievements even more remarkable. She didn't just succeed, she triumphed against the odds. And as her mentor, I've decided to have my department's private fund cover her remaining undergraduate debt as well. Tonight, we aren't just celebrating one debt-free doctor. We're celebrating two. Though one earned it through a checkbook, and the other earned it through sheer, unyielding brilliance. The room didn't just applaud, they stood up. The surgeons from Detroit Medical, the ones my parents were trying to impress, were now walking toward me, ignoring Jessica. My parents looked like they had been turned to stone. They were trapped in a public moment where their favoritism had been laid bare and then outshone. In the aftermath, near the bar, my mother approached me, her face pale. Audrey, why didn't you tell us? You made us look, we didn't know. You didn't know because you never asked, I said, and for the first time, there was no anger in my voice, only a profound sense of closure. You were so busy making sure Jessica didn't fall that you never noticed I was flying. Jessica came up behind us and did something I never expected. She took the "Congratulations, Jessica" banner and pulled it down, the tape snapping loudly. "This was a mistake," Jessica told our parents. "Audrey is the best doctor I know. And if you can't see that, then you're the ones who are missing out, not her." A week later, I was packing my car for Baltimore. My parents had tried to apologize with a rose gold watch, the same one they'd given Jessica months ago, but I had left it on the kitchen counter. I didn't need their tokens anymore. I had my fellowship, I had my sister's respect, and I had a future that I had built with my own two hands. As I drove past the city limits of Detroit, the sun was hitting the rearview mirror, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking back to see if they were following. I was just looking forward. The silence that followed Dr. Fleming's announcement wasn't just quiet, it was a physical weight, a thick, suffocating blanket that seemed to suck the oxygen right out of the rooftop terrace. I could hear the distant hum of Detroit traffic below and the clinking of ice in a glass from a waiter who had frozen mid-stride, but within our immediate circle, time had simply stopped. My mother's hand, still holding her half-full champagne flute, began to tremble ever so slightly, the crystal catching the light of the city's skyline in a way that made the bubbles look like tiny, trapped stars. My father's face went through a fascinating, agonizing metamorphosis. First, a blank mask of shock, then a flush of deep crimson that started at his collar and climbed his hairline, and finally, a hollow, pale expression of realization. They weren't just surprised by my success, they were being publicly outed for their own neglect. Dr. Fleming didn't move. She stood there like a statue of justice, her chin tilted up, her eyes never leaving my father's. She knew exactly what she had done. She had taken the resourceful daughter, the one they used as an excuse to save money and emotional energy, and placed her on a pedestal so high that their investment in Jessica suddenly looked like a consolation prize. The guests began to stir, the silence breaking into 1,000 frantic whispers that buzzed like a hive of disturbed bees. I saw Dean Wilson leaning in to whisper to his wife, his eyes fixed on me with a newfound intensity. I saw Dr. Wu, the woman my parents had been shamelessly courting for Jessica's sake, set her glass down and begin to make a deliberate path toward me. The gravity of the room had shifted, and for the first time in my life, I was the son. "The Patterson Fellowship," my father finally choked out, his voice sounding thin and reedy, as if he were speaking from the bottom of a well. "Audrey, that's at Johns Hopkins. That's in Baltimore." He said it as if the geography were the most shocking part, as if the idea of me being hundreds of miles away from the shadow of their favoritism was a logistical error he couldn't process. "Why didn't you say anything? We've been talking about the future for months. We've been planning Jessica's transition to the DMC residency. We could have helped you pack." "You were busy," I said, and the simplicity of the words felt like a scalpel. "You were busy with the cupcakes, Dad. You were busy with the silver display stands and the guest list for a party that only had one name on it." I looked at my mother, whose eyes were darting around the room, checking to see who was watching. She wasn't worried about my debt or my future. She was worried about the narrative. She was realizing that everyone in this room, the elite of the Michigan medical community, now knew that the Collins parents had a daughter who was a national prodigy, and they hadn't even bothered to put her name on the banner. Jessica was the one who broke the spell. She stepped forward, her silver dress rustling, and did something she hadn't done since we were children. She grabbed my hand and squeezed it so hard it hurt. "Audrey, oh my God," she whispered, her voice thick with a mix of awe and something that sounded suspiciously like relief. "The Patterson. You didn't just get in. You took the top spot. Do you have any idea how incredible that is? I've been sitting here feeling like a fraud all night because I knew I didn't earn this debt-free status, and here you are, you actually earned it. You did it for both of us." "Jessica, honey, don't say that," my mother hissed, finally finding her voice, though it was sharp with panic. She reached out as if to pull Jessica back into the golden child role. "You worked very hard. Your graduation is a massive achievement. We're just overwhelmed." It's a lot of good news at once, isn't it? Two doctors, both debt-free. It's a miracle. It's not a miracle, Mrs. Collins, Dr. Fleming interjected, her tone deceptively sweet. It's a direct result of your daughter's clinical excellence. And as for the debt-free part, I believe the distinction is quite clear to everyone here. One was a gift, the other was a prize. One was a subsidy, the other was a scholarship. I think that deserves a very specific kind of recognition, don't you? She didn't wait for an answer. She turned back to the crowd, raising her own glass. To Dr. Audrey Collins, the newest Patterson Fellow. May her brilliance continue to be recognized, even by those who have been looking at it the longest without seeing it. The toast was followed by a roar of approval that felt like a physical wave hitting me. I felt dizzy, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. People were closing in now. Dr. Wu reached me first, extending a hand that felt firm and professional. Dr. Collins, I've been following your work on neurovascular regeneration in the journals, but I had no idea you were Dr. Fleming's primary partner. Why on earth are you going to Baltimore? We have a world-class facility right here in Detroit. If it's a matter of funding or research autonomy, I'm sure we can match whatever Hopkins is offering. My father stepped in then, trying to regain his footing as the supportive parent. Well, Margaret, we always encouraged Audrey to aim high. We knew she had this in her. She's always been our little scholar, hasn't she? We just didn't want to brag too early. The lie was so blatant, so oily, that I felt a surge of genuine nausea. He was trying to co-opt my victory, to weave it back into the fabric of their perfect family image. He wanted to pretend that my success was a result of their encouragement rather than a survival tactic I had developed to endure their indifference. Actually, Dad, I said, turning to him, you didn't know because you told me not to overshadow Jessica tonight. You told me this was her moment. You told me that I was resourceful enough to handle my own problems, so I did. I handled my loans, I handled my research, and I handled my applications. You weren't part of this because you chose not to be. The surrounding guests grew quiet, eavesdropping on the family drama that was unfolding behind the polite smiles. My mother looked like she wanted the rooftop to open up and swallow her whole. She tried to laugh, a brittle, tinkling sound that died in her throat. Oh, Audrey, you're so dramatic. We were just trying to make sure Jessica felt special for once. You've always been so confident, so self-assured. We didn't think you needed the accolades. Everyone needs accolades, Mom, Jessica snapped, her voice rising. Especially when they've done what Audrey did. I'm standing here under a banner with my name on it that I didn't ask for, while my sister is standing in the corner with a fellowship that changes the face of neurosurgery, and you're still trying to make excuses. It's embarrassing. It's actually pathetic. Jessica's outburst was the final crack in the dam. My parents stood there, exposed and trembling, as their two daughters, the one they favored and the one they ignored, finally stood on the same side of the line. The rest of the evening was a blur of professional networking and internal emotional upheaval. I spoke to more surgeons in those 3 hours than I had in the previous 4 years. They treated me with the level of deference that I wasn't used to, asking for my insights on clinical trials and inviting me to speak at upcoming seminars. I was no longer the other twin, I was a peer. But as the party began to wind down and the city lights of Detroit twinkled with a cold, distant beauty, I found myself standing alone by the railing, looking out over the water. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a hollow ache that no amount of professional validation could truly fill. I had won. I was debt-free, I was going to the best fellowship in the world, and I had finally stood up for myself. But as I looked at my parents across the room, huddled together and speaking in low, frantic tones to my aunt, I realized that the victory was bittersweet. I had gained my freedom, but I had finally, irrevocably lost the hope that they would ever be the parents I needed them to be. Jessica walked up to me, 2 glasses of water in her hands. She looked exhausted, her makeup slightly smudged under her eyes. You okay? She asked, handing me a glass. I don't know, I admitted, taking a sip. I feel like I just went through a war. You did, Jessica said. A 26-year war. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry I was the prize everyone was fighting over. I never wanted to be the reason you felt small, Audrey. It was easier to stay quiet and take what they gave me. I'm a coward for that. You're not a coward, Jess. You were a kid, just like me. We both just did what we had to do to survive them. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the twin I had almost lost to the resentment our parents had fostered. What are you going to do? I'm going to the DMC, she said, her voice firmer now. But I'm not letting them pay for my apartment. And I'm not letting them use my career as a trophy. If they want to be in my life, they have to start treating you like you exist. Otherwise, they don't get either of us. That night, as I drove back to my small, cramped apartment, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a pioneer. I started thinking about Baltimore, the harbor, the brick buildings, the intense, high-stakes environment of Johns Hopkins. It was a place where no one knew Jessica, where no one knew my parents, and where the name Audrey Collins wouldn't be followed by a footnote about her twin. The following morning, the fallout continued. My phone was a constant stream of notifications. Emails from the medical board, congratulatory texts from people I hadn't spoken to since high school, and, inevitably, the "we need to talk" messages from my mother. I ignored them all. I had one more meeting with Dr. Fleming before I began the arduous process of moving. Walking into her office that morning felt different. The air felt lighter. She was sitting at her desk, a stack of paperwork in front of her, but she looked up and beamed the moment I walked in. "Well, Dr. Collins." The talk of the town. "I hear Dean Wilson spent the morning fielding calls from donors asking why our star pupil is leaving for Maryland. I think you might have caused a bit of a scandal, Dr. Fleming," I said, sitting down. "My parents they're not taking it well." "Good," she said, her eyes sharp. "Sometimes a scandal is the only way to break a fever. They've been living in a fever dream of their own making for far too long. But let's talk about you. The Patterson Fellowship is a grueling path, Audrey. You'll be working with some of the most brilliant and most difficult minds in the world. They won't care about your family history. They will only care about what you can do with a scalpel and a microscope. Are you ready for that?" "I've been preparing for that my entire life," I said. "I've spent 26 years proving I belong in the room. I think I can handle a few difficult surgeons." "I have no doubt," she said, leaning back. "But remember this, you don't have to prove anything to them. You've already proven it to yourself. That's the only validation that doesn't spoil." As I left her office, I saw my father standing by the elevators. He looked smaller than he had the night before, his expensive wool coat hanging loosely on his shoulders. He looked like a man who had suddenly realized the world was much larger than his own ego. "Audrey," he said, stepping forward. "Wait. Please." I stopped, but I didn't move toward him. "What is it, Dad?" "Your mother. She's been up all night. She's distraught. She feels like you humiliated us in front of everyone we know. She thinks you did it on purpose, to hurt us." He searched my face, looking for a sign of the compliant daughter he used to have. "Is that true? Did you want to hurt us?" I looked at him, and I didn't feel anger. I felt a profound, weary pity. "I didn't do it to hurt you, Dad. I did it because it was the truth. And if the truth hurts you, then you should probably ask yourself why you built a life on a lie. I didn't humiliate you. Your own choices humiliated you. You chose to ignore me. You chose to celebrate one child while the other was standing right there. I just finally stopped helping you hide it." He opened his mouth to argue, to find a way to make it my fault, but the words wouldn't come. He looked at the floor, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "We're your parents, Audrey. We love you." "Then show me," I said. "Don't tell me. Don't send me a watch. Don't tell your friends about my fellowship. Just see me." But I'm not waiting for it anymore. I have a life to start. I walked past him and into the elevator. As the doors closed, I saw him still standing there, a solitary figure in a vast marble hallway. The ride down was smooth, and when the doors opened to the street, the air was crisp and cold. I started walking, my pace quickening with every step. I had boxes to pack, a lease to sign, and a whole new world to conquer. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Moving is a strange way to audit your life. I found old notebooks from undergraduate studies, filled with frantic scribbles and coffee stains. I found a photo of Jessica and me from our first day of medical school. We were both smiling, but looking back, I could see the tension in my own eyes, the silent calculation of how much harder I would have to work just to be noticed. I threw the old notebooks away, but I kept the photo. It was a reminder of where I had come from and how far I had traveled. Jessica came over every night to help me pack. We didn't talk about our parents much. Instead, we talked about medicine. We talked about her psychiatry rotation and my interest in the blood-brain barrier. We rediscovered the friendship that had been buried under years of parental competition. It was like we were learning to be sisters without a script. You know, Jessica said, sitting on a stack of boxes as I taped up the last of my kitchen supplies. I think Mom is going to try to show up at your apartment before you leave. She's in fix-it mode. She's been looking at apartments in Baltimore online, saying she wants to help you find a safe neighborhood. I laughed, a genuine, hearty sound. She wants to manage my life because she can't manage the optics anymore. Tell her not to bother. I've already signed a lease. It's a small studio near the hospital. It's perfect. I'll tell her, Jessica said, her eyes softening. But you know she won't listen. She thinks if she can just do one mom thing for you, it'll erase the last 20 years. She can think whatever she wants, I said. But the only thing she can do for me now is let me go. The final night in Detroit arrived. My apartment was empty, echoing with the ghosts of the girl I used to be. I sat on the floor, eating pizza out of a box with Jessica, the windows open to the sounds of the city. Tomorrow, the moving truck would arrive, and I would begin the 10-hour drive to Baltimore. Are you scared? Jessica asked, her voice quiet in the empty room. Terrified, I admitted. But for the first time, it's the good kind of scared. The kind that comes from knowing that whatever happens next, it's because of me. Not because of who my parents wanted me to be, and not because of who they didn't want me to be. Just me. You're going to be a legend, Audrey, Jessica said, raising her water bottle in a silent toast. And I'm going to be the sister who tells everyone, yeah, she's amazing. And she did it all on her own. We sat there for a long time, watching the lights of the city flicker. I felt a sense of peace that I had never known. The debt was gone, not just the financial debt, but the emotional debt I felt I owed to a family that never truly invested in me. I was paid in full. As the sun began to peek over the horizon the next morning, I loaded the last of my bags into my car. The moving truck was already ahead of me, a giant white box carrying my entire life toward the East Coast. I took one last look at the Detroit skyline, a city that had been both my proving ground and my prison. I thought about the rooftop party, the lavender honey cupcakes, and the Jessica banner. They felt like a lifetime ago. I pulled out onto the highway, the GPS set for Baltimore. As I merged into traffic, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. Audrey, please call me. We want to take you to breakfast before you leave. We have so much to discuss about your future. I looked at the message for a long moment. Then I put the phone in the cup holder and kept my eyes on the road. There was nothing left to discuss. The future was already happening, and it was beautiful. The drive was long, a ribbon of asphalt stretching through Ohio and Pennsylvania. I had a lot of time to think. I thought about the patients I would treat, the surgeries I would perform, and the research that would hopefully change the lives of people with traumatic brain injuries. I thought about Dr. Fleming's words, that validation doesn't spoil when it comes from within. By the time I crossed the Maryland border, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated joy. I was Dr. Audrey Collins, Patterson Fellow, and I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The shadow of the invisible twin was gone, replaced by the light of a woman who had finally stepped into her own power. When I finally pulled onto the streets of Baltimore, the air felt different, salty, humid, and full of possibility. I found my new building, a charming old brick structure with a view of the harbor. As I unlocked the door to my new apartment, I realized that I wasn't just moving to a new city. I was moving into a new version of myself. One that didn't need to be resourceful to survive, but could use that resourcefulness to thrive. I stood in the center of my new home, the silence welcoming me. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was free. And as I looked out at the lights of Baltimore, I knew that the best part of my story was just beginning. Baltimore was a city of red brick and relentless ambition, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting for a seat at the table. The table had been set specifically for me. The transition to Johns Hopkins was a whirlwind of high-stakes surgeries and late-night data analysis that would have broken the girl I used to be. But the Audrey who arrived in Maryland was forged in the fire of being overlooked, and I moved through the prestigious halls with a quiet confidence that unsettled the arrogant and inspired the weary. My research flourished, gaining international attention, yet the most profound victory wasn't the publications or the praise, it was the silence of my phone. For months, I kept a respectful but firm distance from my parents. They sent flowers for my first lead surgery and long, rambling emails detailing their realization of how they had failed me. They spoke of therapy and new beginnings, but I knew that some foundations are too cracked to ever hold the weight of a skyscraper. I chose to forgive them for my own peace, but I stopped looking to them for my weather report. I was my own son now. The real reconciliation happened with Jessica. She visited me 6 months into my fellowship, looking different, less like a curated doll and more like a woman finding her own skin. She had finished her first rotation in Detroit and had finally stood her ground, refusing to let our parents buy her a luxury condo. We spent a weekend sitting by the Inner Harbor, eating crab cakes and talking about the future. "They still don't get it, you know," Jessica said, watching a boat glide across the water. "They think you're being stubborn. They don't realize you're just being whole." "I'm not angry anymore, Jess," I told her, and I meant it. But I finally figured out that being resourceful wasn't a compliment they gave me, it was an excuse they used to avoid loving me the way I needed. I don't need to be resourceful here. I just need to be me. As I walked back to the hospital that Sunday evening, the sunset reflected off the glass of the surgical wing. I thought about that rooftop party in Detroit, the Jessica banner, and the stinging smell of lavender honey cupcakes. Those memories didn't hurt anymore. They were just markers on a map of a place I no longer lived. I stepped through the sliding glass doors, my badge clipping onto my white coat, a coat I had earned with every drop of sweat and every lonely hour. I was Dr. Audrey Collins, and for the first time in 26 years, I wasn't the invisible twin. I was the one leading the way.